Hi guys, it's been a while since I uploaded a video, but here we are now with a manhwa review. For this video, I'll be covering the first and second season of the manhwa called Charlotte Has Five Disciples by Yongyong, and its official website is Tapas. I will divide it into two sections, which are the spoiler-free and with spoilers, so if you haven't read it, you can skip the second part, and without further ado, let's get on with the video. For those of you who don't know, Charlotte Has Five Disciples focuses on the grand magician named Charlotte. She became a legend after defeating the dark force, which they called cataclysm. She has a very strong foundation and morals within herself. She respects her master deeply, in which he advises her to get five disciples before he died. He said not to repeat his mistake of bearing his worries all on his own, and so Charlotte continues to find her five disciples up in order to share her knowledge and burden, since she's also been soloing all her life. Additionally, just to guide and help them throughout their life decisions, situations, etc. One day, she reflected on all of her achievements and decided that she was done. She felt satisfied with what she had achieved, and she now wanted to live peacefully. What happened is she prepared this magic for her to die, since she can't be killed by anyone, so she needs to do this all by herself. Before putting herself in a coffin, she left a message to each of her disciples, bidding them goodbye, and off she goes. She was supposed to be dead, but she didn't expect herself to wake up. Literally, her plan failed, and she only made one chance for her to do that, and she reached the conclusion that there is a reason that she can't be rested. As she looked around, she realized something is different. She became a small child. She now believed that her attempt to kill herself failed because deep in her heart there is still something that she hadn't achieved, and that is love. She never experienced true love all this time. We're talking about the cheesy couple romantic stuff. She didn't do any of that. She now goes to a comrade of hers, or we can say a close friend named Duke Jeffrey Lewister, and told him she needs his help. Jeffrey helped her in an instant and placed her together with these children named Jerome and Judith Halford. For a couple of years, Charlotte stayed with them in order to hide her identity. She has no idea if she still wanted to be affiliated with her disciples, which throughout the years, Jeffrey has also been monitoring them. Let's just say that they became out of control. Loki goes crazy when they found out that Charlotte is dead. In the 16th years of her second life, which is the current timeline, Charlotte finds out that her disciples are in all such chaotic situations and she needs to see them. One by one, she starts to find them, which is the focus of the story. Many things happen, and there's also the comeback of cataclysm, which is the one that she defeated in the first part of the story. What's more is that it may be connected to one of her disciples, and she can't just let that happen, so that's the story. This is the story of Charlotte reuniting with her five disciples, saving the world once again, and hopefully finding her true love. I absolutely love this manhwa. I always see the title on my timeline, in my social media, mainly just arguing who is the second male lead or something, and I thought it's a reverse harem. But I didn't expect this to be one of the most fun historical isekai manhwa that I've ever read. Great combination of fun to the story. I can't put this in other words, but it's just so funny. It's one of the factors that got me hooked on this manhwa. I thought that it will have a serious undertone, but it's not the case here. It's the one that had my type of humor, similarly like the Beware of the Villainess, the funny faces and random dialogues here and then that makes me giggle. They mix the funny element to the storyline naturally. Complex characters and their chemistry. It's also interesting how the story introduces each of the disciples and generally just the characters. They all have such different backgrounds from each others and different relationships with Charlotte. They all have their own story to be hooked on, and the way that they respect Charlotte is on another level, but they can be childish most of the time. This is when we can have two arguments because Charlotte didn't inform them in some way and she just decides to disappear one day while they all relied on her heavily. So the disciples feel kind of sad and betrayed. On the other hand, we have Charlotte's side, which she thought that her disciples will understand her decision because she believes in them. Let's just say that if you like stories with multiple characters that have unique stories in them and great chemistry with each other, I guarantee that this manhwa is 100% for you. 10% romance and 90% fantasy. The amount of romance in this is actually so small. Despite the main lead's goal of finding her true love, you will be surprised that the amount of romance in this is so small, but that is also fine for me because I also like stories that have the fantasy segment as the main theme while having a romance subplot. Just a good fantasy. If it's boring or what, I can't stand it, but not for this manhwa. For the romance, there is a debate between two male characters, but for me, I thought that it was a solid bet. When I saw this one character, I think this is spoiler, so I'm going to talk about him vaguely. Anyways, I instantly know that he will become the main lead. No arguments, and throughout the story, he and Charlotte just have this natural chemistry between them. The tension and connection are there, and their scenes and exchanges of dialogues are just top notch. I never once doubted or freaking ship her with the other one, and it's always been him. Amazing visuals and character design. Even though some of the readers have problems with the disproportionate style of the art, like the head is kind of big compared to the body, but I don't know, it also just works for me and I don't mind it. What matters is each of them look good and had that charisma, and as long as I can differentiate them from each other, it's good to me. The fight scenes are also quite good. Like it became a fantasy heavy focus at some part where there are like magic everywhere, and sometimes I couldn't care about them, but for this one there are quite a lot of fight scenes that became memorable. That's all for the spoilers free. We will now move to the second part, which is with spoilers. So if you haven't read it, I suggest you skip this video for now and come back after you've read it. We have a lot to unpack here, especially me just gushing about whatever the greatness and happiness that this manhwa brings me. This season is more about introducing and establishing the characters' personality as well as their status and stories. As mentioned earlier, I adore how the manhwa introduces each of the characters, from Dan Monte, which is the most adorable disciple, Cartillion. I'm okay with him. He seems like the most mature of them, considering that he's literally a king of a nation. He's also the one who accepts Charlotte's decision and even persuades her to just leave her disciples and have her peace of mind. We actually love that. Eldo is cute and powerful. Her moment when she turned into her giant version. What a time, to be honest. Urian, she is also my baby. Her story is just sad, and I'm glad Charlotte saved her. She's so beautiful, and I only wish for her to be forever happy and continue slaying. Lastly, we have Evan. I have opinions about him. First of all, the man that I mentioned earlier is obviously Jeffrey. Like the moment I saw him, I know he was going to be the male lead. So Evan kinda irks me in some way. He seems to be overly obsessive with Charlotte most of the time, and he's literally affiliated with the enemy, even though it's to save Charlotte or whatever. I just can't root for him big time, but I will say that he is definitely an interesting character. There's still a lot that is not unfolded pertaining to his story, so I will still be there to read that. Of course, we should talk about the man of this manhwa, Jeffrey. I just love him. Imagine being dedicated to one person for such a long time. He's just what I want in a man, to be honest. The way that he thinks about Charlotte every time, like how he was terrified learning Charlotte attempts to leave, and when she came back, he instantly got this magic that if Charlotte dies, he will also die. Like, where do I get this kind of man? I'm crying and screaming every time he makes a move on her, actually going feral for him. They got me giggling and feeling things. Season 2 is just full of action and intense scenes. From the moment Charlotte moves to Cartelian's country, it's just non-stop fantasy action from there. At some point, I even find myself quite overwhelmed with all the scenes and things that are happening, but I also enjoyed it. We also have Jeffrey's confession, which is also a top moment. Jeffrey versus Evan is also amazing, and lastly, Jeffrey's losing his memories. I'm like hyperventilating when Charlotte just tries to solve this problem. The last chapters honestly have my heart, and when they literally kiss, I scream and cry. It's just satisfying, and although I binge read it, I feel like we've come a long way witnessing this moment. We've been knew that Charlotte is also been thinking of Jeffrey most of the time ever since he confesses. Like, just from this, the manhwa has literally been hinting that Jeffrey is the only one that has romantic motives for Charlotte, or like Charlotte only thinks of Jeffrey that way. For Evan, she views him more as a disciple, like a student that she needs to save or guide. Meanwhile, Charlotte and Jeffrey are on the same stage. I also noticed that the cataclysm have something with Charlotte. I don't know, it seems like he also wants to possess her. What I'm guessing is that since she's the only one that got to defeat him, he's like being threatened or something. I hope for him to stop doing things to Charlotte like, what is this? I admit that it kind of had a chemistry, but I need him to stop and get away from her as soon as possible. That's all for the season 2. As for my expectations, there's really nothing extravagant expectations that I have. I just want the story to flow just the way it is. I'm expecting the usual fantasy story, maybe the final battle between Cataclysm and Charlotte or Jeffrey. I hope to have the romance part finally going. I wanted Charlotte to feel the true love that she deserves and for the disciples to stop giving her stress. Somehow, I feel like something sad or tragic is going to happen, but it's just a feeling. Overall, I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the next season. That is all for the video. I hope you enjoyed this review. I think I will be doing this kind of video more often. And thank you for all the support. Have a good day, and I will see you next time.